There it is. Good evening, good afternoon. I'm so proud of that, our intro music because I did it myself. You can't tell me I'm not a beat maker. Anyway, good afternoon, good evening, whichever one it is. Thank you all for joining us for the See Us podcast ran by the Narrative Justice. I am your host, Shannon Hughes. This podcast is to amplify invisible voices, people who are marginalized, invisible, and erased. But we also want to amplify what's going on locally, which you wouldn't typically hear in our traditional news streams. This The narrative justice itself got started in honor of Leroy Powell. Leroy, if you were not familiar, was 15 years old in 2014. He was murdered, and he was a witness to an attempted murder turned infanticide. And in giving his witness statement, his witness statement was played during a preliminary hearing, which our local news decided that it was okay to play that witness statement on the 11 o'clock news. Him and his mother being completely exposed, and very immediately, both he and his mother were receiving death threats, and several days later, Leroy was taken from us, and that was absolutely like the carelessness of our local media. And so his story has never left me. So we uplift and we honor Leroy Powell always. And to that, we should always hold our local media accountable for the ways that they show up, particularly when it's Black, brown, and marginalized voices that they are so-called representing or speaking about. Like their words, like narrative is super powerful. It's our most powerful tool. And when it's not wielded with respect and ethically, we tend to suffer from it. So to that, I just want to remind everybody that it only takes about 25% of a community to create for change to occur. And so like if Pittsburgh is only 310,000 people, about 1 million people who interact with the city on a regular basis, we only need about 25% of those people to spark the change that we want to see, right? Like we talk about change and it feels big sometimes, it feels too big sometimes, but I just want to remind everybody that it's not that big. It only takes 25%. So 25% of 310,000 people is not a lot of people. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about what impact you have. You have wild impact, and your narrative is super, super powerful. A few updates. For one thing, I want to remind everybody that today's news, Changing Our Narrative, starts Mondays or is on Mondays at 7 p.m. You can find them on QK Productions Facebook. YouTube is Black News 325. On Twitter is Black News 325. On my other hats, I run the Wellness Collective, and right now we are running a drop-in center for rent relief in Allegheny County. So if you are a person who could benefit from rent relief or utility relief, or just kind of want to know, in Mckeesport, PA 15132. We also have a food pantry. We'll soon have a closet with like clothes and other essentials and such. So please stop by whenever you want to stop by. If you have a needs of any sort, if you'd like to donate to the pantry or to the closet, please do so. We're definitely accepting donations. If you're donating clothes, please make sure that they are clean, like new, because we want to make sure we're respecting people. Down the street from us is our friends, Team PSBG. They run the co-ed shelter, and right now they are in need of Black hair and body care products. So you can donate to them those products at 523 St. Clair Street, Mckeesport, PA 15132. You can contact Aubrey Plesh at Team PSBG to get on that. So that's the last of my introduction stuff. So got that out the way, and I am super excited about this particular topic. It's something that, if you know me, you've heard me talk about quite often. Award culture in Pittsburgh, in Greater Pittsburgh. It's a thing that it's so we're so heavily engaged with different awards for different things, and I've noticed personally just like the impact of the awards and just like how they come about, right? Like the different mechanisms that are used for folks to be recognized, and the mechanisms that are used to kind of disqualify folks from being recognized. So we have several folks who are going to be on here today. They have different relationships around award culture that I respect, and I found them to be very interesting. We invited a few more folks. These are the people who showed up, so I'm excited to have them. So I'm going to stop running my mouth. I'm going to introduce, the first person I want to introduce is Miss Sharice Nance. What's up, Sharice? How are you?
Okay, just had to make sure I was unmuted, because I know that's like the statement of the year. You're on mute. I am well. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show. This is my first time on, and I'm loving it. I like how you start off with the resources. But for those of you who don't know me, just a little bit about me. I am a Pittsburgh native, and I'm the co-owner and founder of Hand in Hand Counseling Services with my friend and partner Tess Kinney. We're private counseling practice in Penn Hills. We're group practice, and we are going into 8 years of service. So we're super excited about that. And I also run an organization called Vitamin C Healing. No, we're not selling vitamins. I often get asked that a lot, but it's metaphor for healing of the whole person, with the hopes that when people experience me speaking and experience my books, that they will have the same experience that they get when they take the actual nutrient, vitamin C. And we cater to helping and healthcare professionals who are struggling with compassion fatigue and burnout.
Thank you so much, Sharice. And I want to ask you really quickly. So you actually have an award. Can you talk about the award that you actually produced?
Yes, so it's the SWAG Awards. My husband actually came up with the acronym. He's really good at that with acronyms. The SWAG Awards, Social Worker Appreciation of Greatness Award, and the mission is to honor those social workers in the greater Pittsburgh region who often go unnoticed, unrecognized, and unappreciated for their efforts. I am a social worker, so it's something that I have experienced personally, and a lot of my colleagues have talked about. So I was looking for solutions, and I wanted something strictly for social workers because I don't think social workers have title protection. And I'll admit, a few people came for me for limiting it to social workers and asked me why am I being focused on people having degrees. And it's turn my mic down. Okay, let me see. Oh, this one's good. Okay, so I turn my mic down. How is that? I hope that's better. Okay. So some people came for me because it was specifically for social workers, and we had to make qualifications. You had to have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, license, or a doctorate degree in social work, because we wanted to create that space for social workers. We go to school, we have these student loans, and why can't we have a space to celebrate social workers? So it was specifically for social workers because I wanted to make sure that we are getting honored and celebrated for our work. No, we don't get into this profession to get an award, and we know it is nice to be acknowledged for the work that we are doing, especially during these times. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, and social workers are essential. They've been at the front lines, and I was definitely just grateful that we were still able to have a virtual award ceremony to honor. And Shannon was one of the awardees, so I'm happy she accepted, because a lot of social workers were very humble and did not want to accept the award because this is the work that we are called to do.
Word up. Thank you so much. And if you didn't see, or if you weren't a part of the virtual award ceremony that Sharice did, it was super cool. Like the different amenities and things that you can get into. Like that was a cool platform. So I appreciated that. And it was smooth. I know it's a lot of work, but it was I appreciated it. But I do want to get more into that because I'm curious about your process. Like, again, anyone who knows me know that I have all sorts of critique about awards. And I do think they're important, right? Like, so I think it's very important to recognize folks for their work for a lot of different reasons. But also, like, there's a lot of pitfalls and landmines when it comes to award culture. Like, and what does it look like to choose one person over another? And like, how are we being consistent? How are we being ethical? So I do want to get more into that. But shout out to you and all of that. And thank you for explaining that, Sharice. So the next person I want to bring up is Charlie Beach. What's going on, Charlie? How are you?
I'm doing well, Shannon. How are you? Thanks for having me on. I'm glad we can finally talk about this after 2 years of of going back and forth about this. I'm glad to have the conversation.
Yeah, man. Charlie and I, so background, Charlie and I had this conversation about award culture literally 2 years ago.
Mhm.
It was, just a conversation. I don't even know how we got started in the conversation, but it came into this space. And, and I'll let Charlie give his introduction a little bit more, but he has, an extensive history in journalism. So he was able to provide a lot of insight on what does that look like on the other end, which pretty much confirmed my suspicions about the violence or like the issues. So Charlie, before I'm gonna stop running my mouth too much. Who are you? What do you do? Like, what's your deal?
I'm Charlie Deach, and I've for a little over 29 years I've been a professional journalist. Since 2018, I started the Pittsburgh Current, co-founder of the Pittsburgh Current. I'm the current publisher and editor of the Pittsburgh Current. And starting this summer, we just sort of made a soft announcement. We're going to be starting a brand new nonprofit news outlet in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. We've got a lot of plans, and we're starting to work on our first bit of stories. And so this is something that's probably been this is something I probably told you 2 years ago that I wanted to do, and finally it's happening. So we're hoping that that's going to, and we can talk about that some other time, but we're really hoping to change the way newsrooms are formed, and the voices that are currently amplifying the news and bringing the news to folks, that has to be a lot different. It has to be a lot more representative of our communities. And so that's the whole point of Pinch. So we're looking forward to that. But before the Pittsburgh Current, I was spent 13 years, I think 15 years at the Pittsburgh City Paper. Started as a writer, became the news editor, and then since 2014 to 2018, I was the editor. And you can Google my name, you can find a lot out about that situation on how it ended. But one of the things and I want to be clear that it wasn't just, ever since I joined news media in 1992, every paper has had these awards, the best whatever, the best pizza place, the best. And so I never really knew, before I was in the business, I would see those signs. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. You see a plaque on a wall in a restaurant or something. And then I once I got exposed to it, like I said, from the very beginning of my career, but I will say it wasn't until that I was at City Paper in a management position starting around 2007 that I really saw the whole thing about not wanting to know how the sausage is made. I thought, okay, but now that I know how the sausage is made, it's not a pretty thing, and it's a lot of things that I think most people on my side of the wall, the editorial side, it's not something that that we're happy to do or that we want to do, and I've fought for years against these things. But it's in our business, it's strictly a money-making activity. It is probably, and I can only speak for my experiences in terms of revenue, but in the last couple of years that I was at City Paper, again, because it accounted for probably one of the largest percentages, maybe a third, I don't want to misspeak, but about a third of the revenue for the year came out of this process for these Best of Awards. We can talk about all facets of it if you want, but yeah, I've been on all sides of it, and I've seen it all. You sort of go into it, you're like, oh, these are bull, it's these are fixed, and they're not. Well, let's just say there's truth. There's a bit of truth in all of that, and so I'm glad to talk about whatever you like to in that regard. And when I started the Current, I decided right off the bat that we're not doing these things. Could we have used the money, especially starting out? Absolutely. Could we use the money now? Absolutely. But that money is not worth, I think, the problems and the issues that these things cause on the back end. And again, I've seen fights, arguments, all kinds of things over these awards. So I'm glad to shed any light I can on these things.
Word up. Thank you so much, Charlie. Appreciate you. So I'm looking forward to digging into this conversation. And anyone who's watching, please do feel free to comment, ask questions. Our folks are here to answer those questions. This is a conversation, and a conversation that's well overdue. So we have one more guest today. We have Miss Ramona Jones.
Can y'all see me clearly and hear me okay?
Very clear.
I was having technical difficulties. And I still am, but as long as you all say you can hear and see me clearly, please excuse my my lateness. I was, like I said, trying to upload it on my Apple, and it was telling me I needed to be in a different browser. So either way, I'm here, and I'm honored to be a part of this platform tonight. Thank you so much, Shannon, for allowing me the opportunity and offering this space to me. Thank you to us, actually.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're actually right on time, Mona, so no worries at all. I'm glad that you're able to be on. So Mona, really quickly, I would like you to, so what we're doing, we're just introducing ourselves, and I would like you to introduce yourself however you would like to introduce yourself. Like, how do you orient yourself in community? How do you view yourself in community and your work? All that fun stuff.
Well, I'm born and raised here in Pittsburgh, and I would say, for the most part, social justice, social injustice. I consider myself a responder to social injustices, within the Black culture. And so, and I was initiated into that at the age of 14, but I have been, solid and consistent with being a responder to social injustice activism. I would say for at least 20 years now, 15 to 20 years, pretty much. And so, activism always starts in the home first, with your children, of which, I have, I have a son now, and I did have a daughter. I lost my daughter in 2016. And, we passed that mantle on to our children. So, activism starts in the home first, so, but that is where activism actually started for me. But I would say when I really got initiated would have been at the tender age of 14. When I had when we were moved to Los Angeles, California, as a teenager. And so, and even earlier than that, I think I was 8 or 9 years old when my father, who is a devout Muslim, gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X. And as soon as I was old enough to read that book, my father put that book in my hand at a very tender age. And so from then I was just, ignited to learn more about, our fight, as a culture of people. And I've not let up. There's been moments within my life that I did, have to withdraw for a little while, just to have some self-care and to regain some balance in regards to social injustice. Because if I'm no good for myself, then I'm no good to the people. And so, yeah, but in the interim of things, I've been consistent for at least 15 years strong.
Word up. Thank you so much.
And that entails, let me just say, that entails a plethora of social injustice. We're talking, education injustices, environmental injustices. So there's been a plethora of social injustice campaigns that I found myself immersed in throughout the years, as well as police terrorism. So that pretty much has been my platform.
Word up, word up. Thank you so much. All right, so I would like to open up a conversation to anybody who wants to respond first, and then y'all can go from there. The first thing I'm curious about is like how you all generally view award culture. Like, what are your general thoughts about awards and award giving?
So let me take a stab at it, because I was, thinking about this. I was an athlete. In my younger years, I ran track. And I was thinking about how awards and the difference between an award and a reward, and when you're the teacher's pet, you kind of like, you get rewarded for being the teacher's pet, you know what I'm saying? But like, as a track star, and I ran track, you build up the momentum to that place of awards. You know what I'm saying? There's a consistency, there's a training that goes on that you intentionally are committed to, and with the expectations of an expected outcome from the work that you put in. But as a teacher's pet, you don't really got to do anything, as you know, to gain a reward. It's almost like giving a dog a bone. You did well. But when you train and you practice for a thing, it's an awarding to me that takes place. This was the way that I saw it, because, you know, as an athlete, like, again, you know, there's intense training that goes into that thing. And you as an individual, you want someone to notice all the hard work and the effort that you've put in from, you know, everything that you've done to build yourself up for this moment, only to have someone come along and give it to the teacher's pet who didn't deserve it. Okay. So, you know, that's kind of like where I kind of like my intake. That's just a portion though. I have many different analogies for it, but that was just one of them.
I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that breakdown. Sharice, Charlie, y'all got any thoughts?
Yeah, I love how Mona broke down the difference between reward and award. I mean, to piggyback off of that, I also think that and when I was planning the swag award, something that I kept at top of mind was that award ceremonies, whether you get them or you don't get the award, especially if you know you've been nominated and then you see this long list comes out and your name is not on it, it can lead to feelings of invalidation. You know, you get discouraged. People can fall into a depression. It can affect self-esteem. So we just want to be careful not to create, as I was talking to somebody about this earlier, a sense of false validation. Whether you get the award or not, especially, you know, with something like Social Worker Appreciation of Greatness Awards, it doesn't mean that you are a lesser social worker or that your work isn't valued. With an award ceremony like that, I just want to use that as an example. The main purpose is to recognize the profession that often does not get recognized, because many people, you know, call themselves social workers even though they're not social workers. So, you know, just to sum up, I just think we just want to be mindful of that false sense of validation and how it can impact, you know, self-esteem if someone is doing the work and working really hard and know that they've been nominated and they did not get the award. What can that do to them, and what can that do to the work and the people that they serve?
Yeah, and one kind of, again, based on what Mona said, it's absolutely true. If you're running a race, if you're playing a baseball game, you know if you've won because there's a way to measure that. There's a score, there's a time. But a lot of the type of awards, and I'm mainly speaking of the media awards that go through especially, you know, newspapers. There's no rubric. It's just a way to get as many names out as possible. And again, the hope from the advertising, the business side of the publication is, let's make sure we get some people in there who spend money with us, you know, and that's kind of the whole point. And it really is. It's like, it's very much as simply a reward for certain people, but it's also, again, it's just, you know, again, I don't want to say there's anything deep and nefarious about it. I mean, it's newspapers are out, or news media companies are out there to make money, except ours. We do very poorly at that. But, you know, a lot of times, you know, and that's when we did this, like, integrity is more important than, you know, than spiking that great issue where you're going to make a couple of $100,000 in 1 month's worth of work. And so there really is, and as I said, it's advertising that sort of runs these things, and it's editorial that has to sort of mop up. We come in and we have to do all these stories, and you know, we write about the same 3 pizza places every year. We write about the same band every year, because, you know, the people who are voting in these contests, or the bands that win, they're out there saying, hey, vote for me for, you know, for best whatever. And so, you know, there have been opportunities where, again, when I was at City Paper, you know, as editorial staff, we would try and change every year. We try and change how it would work. You know, we try and make it, either like, look, we're being honest. If we just say this is a staff pick, this our staff, this is what we like. And again, that's not good either. But it was some sort of, we thought better way. We did that once, and the fact and advertising lost their mind, because it was, a lot of their customers were left out, and a lot of the things that. It's just, it really is. It's not there for the right purpose at all. It's not there to recognize people doing outstanding work in a certain area. It's there to make money. That's it. That's the only thing. And people take these so seriously. Like I said, we've had, I've had more, I've written about all sorts of controversial topics. I've written about police violence and all this stuff for 20 years. But the worst calls I've gotten from people have been, why didn't we win, best bakery, something like that. And it's just, people put all their energy and their thoughts and their self-respect, is sort of their who they are, their identity into these things. And it's, they're just not every award, but these things, they're just, they're not awards. They are, they're, who can get the most votes or spend the most money.
Yes. Thank you all so very much. A couple of things that I heard that's sticking in my mind right now is Mona's award versus reward. And then Charlie, you mentioning like there's no rubric. So like the rubric part has always stuck out to me, because it's like, what's the consistency, right? Like, what are people being validated based on? Because I feel like, and again, like, I think it's important to recognize people for their work, like, absolutely. Because folks do a lot of work, in that, like recognition, like, not only is it, like, it feels good to know that like people see me like down here fighting and doing all of the things, but also like there's actual benefit, right? And so to Mona's like reward versus award, I'm thinking about like, like when you are given an award in a particular publication, like how many doors open up, and which is okay if it's deserved, but I'm also thinking about the folks who like, they didn't actually deserve it, like they just had proximity to the people who were making the decisions. And then, those doors opened up for them. And then also like the other side of that is that there are people who actually do a lot of work, right? Like in whatever the category is, and they're not receiving like, that type of support, that resourcing, and then protection on top of that. Like, and of course, like I do a lot of like social justice stuff. So like when you are an activist, an advocate or whatever, like your safety is constantly like, a thing, right? Like it's constantly changing, right? Like, so like to not be visible is literally violent, like there's literal violence in that, like, and not to say that everybody should be like, like, all right, you're doing this and you get a participation award, but I'm thinking about like the rubric part, like, right? Like if there was a standard of this is what it's being based on, that was across the board, then I wonder if that would change, and it was transparent, right? Like, like we know that this is what, everybody was measured against, right? Like, and this is why these folks were chosen versus these other folks. But that's what's sticking out in my mind right now. I'm gonna step back if anybody had thoughts before I move forward. Mona, you muted.
My mic. I agree, with what everybody has said, on the panel. No one wants to feel, a person who has been committed to a journey, to their vision board, and that have shared their vision, to be able to enrich and enlighten a particular, you're targeting your own people, and these are the people that need the help. And then those same people, when it appears as though you're not being acknowledged, and let me just say, just for the record, I have been acknowledged. I have received awards in this city, from various individuals. One was recognition for mothers that was put on by, I believe it was Mary Ellen Deckard of the New Institute. She did this for mothers who had lost their children. This was right after I lost my daughter. And, she had awarded us for, some things. I've been awarded through the youth ministry and Homestead, for going in and teaching them cultural liturgical dance, which was a whole experience with the youth, and it was so honorable, and that the greatest feeling to me is when the children award you. Forget the adults. It's when the kids, acknowledge, the work that you're actually imparting into them. That was one of the greatest experiences for me, in my life. But, we just need to be mindful that there is an erasure culture, that is going on even in the realm of social injustice. We just had Samira Rice, which was Tamir Rice's mother, who, was beating the drum about how, there's this celebrityism, that has infiltrated its way into social injustices, to the point where mothers of, the victims of these police slaughterings are somehow, are left disgruntled, while these other people, the advocates, the lawyers, end up being in the spotlight. Will some of these parents still not have had justice, and so, we have a situation there. And I think that is something, because yes, people, even such as myself, who's been out here fighting for justice for a family, if we don't forget that, we have to keep humility in sight, and not allow for our heads to get so big to the point where we think that, we're the cream of the crop of this movement. It is a collective effort, for us to seek justice for each individual in the community that has suffered injustices. And so, it is a conversation that I'm pretty sure we won't probably be able to finish here, because it's been going on for quite some time. But it's about passing the baton. And when we don't respect the predecessors that were here before us, it sends a message, that people can just go out here as lone rangers and do it on their own. And then that's where they end up crashing and burning. I believe teamwork makes the dream work. But yet and still, there's this erasure, and there's this a culture of isolation that says otherwise.
There have been times when, most every one of these polls, newspapers, especially especially the editorial folks, we want to try and bring at least some legitimacy to these things. So, for example, we try and introduce rewards like best nonprofit. Recent years it's been best activist, but it's all subjective. Even though you have people who've are covering these groups and kind of making the nominations, and then the people are voting on them, it's still it's not really giving a sense for who is the best, or even just who's out there making a difference. It really is, again, it all comes down to a popularity contest in those. And those are not really, those aren't really finance driven. They're not driven based on money. They're the editorials attempt to get something in there that's not just, best bank. And some of these categories are just the most ridiculous things ever. But some of these things, best blogger and things like that. It's coming from a place of who or what about, or what you watch or what you listen to, and who you maybe happen to see leading this protest one day, but you have no idea who's working behind the scenes on this issue for 5, 10, 15 years. And so it can weigh on you. And I will say that as journalists, we're in our award season right now. And locally, for the Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania Press Club, I've won many of them in the past, prior to 2018, starting my own paper. But in 2018, when we only got one nomination, I was like, oh my God, what did we do wrong? Who are we, what are we not doing? What are we? And the fact is, we were doing something completely different that, and we shouldn't let the fact that we didn't win an award change what we were doing or try and change the direction that we're doing. But we do. That's the funny thing is, like, journalists take these things just as serious as everyone else does. When it's time for us to get our awards and our sort of notice. But yeah, as far as rubric goes, at least if we're doing a poll on best pizza, and that's the only thing, not a poll, but we're doing a story about best pizza. We'll sit. We've done this in the past. We've sat down. You'll make a list. What is the crust like? And you score it. What is the sauce like? And you score it. What is the service like? And you score it. But again, even that has a level of subjectiveness in it, and that kind of at least some level, that's at least putting thought into what you're doing, and that just doesn't exist in a lot of these things.
So I just want to piggyback on what both Mona and Charlie said, and I came across a comment that I thought was pretty powerful. There's an inherent bias within words like best. I absolutely agree, because then that's when we create that that division. That's when we create that that false sense of validation. And that's why with an award ceremony like Social Worker Appreciation of Greatness, we wanted to be intentional about what the title was about, and the purpose of the ceremony, to make sure that we are honoring people for their hard work. And like Mona was mentioning, I too have been the recipient of many awards in this region. And now, in full transparency, I remember there was a time when I had mentors nominating me for awards for years, and they told me, and they couldn't believe that I wasn't a part of that list that we were talking about. And initially, I'm like, well, I don't care. That's not why I'm doing the work. Obviously, it's never why I'm doing the work. But then it started to get to me too personally, like, well, why am I not a part of this list? Like, what do I need to do? And, I remember having a talk with my husband, like, well, that's not why you're doing this work. You got to remember the reason why. Let's not get caught up in all these awards. That's not important. So I think it can impact anyone. And that was a big part of the reason why I created, the Social Worker Appreciation of Greatness Awards, because for that reason, I want to make sure we are doing this from a place of integrity, where we are honoring people for the work. And we don't want to turn this into a popularity contest, or I know the words participation trophy get thrown around. We don't want to just give people awards because they kind of showed up, or because they're known. We want to recognize people based on the value that they add, based on the work that they are committing. We want to make sure that we are recognizing that, because there is something about when you get that recognition, it can, even if it makes you feel good in that moment, it's a way to really to add some form of value. So I do think we just have to be careful with the mission behind these awards. And I'll tell y'all, there was no money being made from the Social Worker Appreciation of Greatness. In fact, I probably lost some money. But it's not a money maker. There are other ways, that I make money as a business owner. And I didn't want this award ceremony to be one of them, because, some of the ticket prices can be ridiculous for these award ceremony. And that lets me know that it is a money maker.
Word up. Thank y'all so much. Sharice, you said division, and that made me think about a few years ago, there was an award for Black people, young Black people in the Pittsburgh, whatever. And I seen it like happening. I seen it as it was like coming together, because I knew a lot of people who were a part of it. And I didn't understand what it was at first, but I was like, oh, that's dope, or whatever. I seen folks, in their photo shoots and whatever. It's like, oh, this is cool. But when it came out, the narrative that was constructed around it was that these are the young Black people who have made Black Pittsburgh what it is. And I was like, oh, that's not true, and not to say like, there were plenty of folks in there that were like super, super dope, do like work, like they do work, but there were folks who were just in proximity, like, and that's just a thing that we know. And so like, and it was causing so much conflict, right? Like it was causing all of these feelings and folks to, kind of crash up against each other, like, or whatever. I didn't know the host at the time, but I ran into them somewhere. And so, I pulled them to the side. I was like, I don't understand what this is. Can you, explain it to me? And they sat down and they, told me that, like it started out as a project. They work with some kids, and one of their kids said that they never see Black people doing good things. And you know what I mean? And so like, it was a pet project that like, oh, like, well, me and my friends do good things. So it's going to be me and my 50 friends, and we're going to make it a book project. And so that, like there's representation for this kid. And it, from how it was explained to me, is that it ballooned out into this other thing. So it was like, like, well, all right, well, my 50 friends, like, why don't you nominate 5 people that you think are dope, or whatever. And then it turned into what it was. And I was like, okay, I could see how that happened. But the narrative is not that, like you were seeking representation for your kids or for kids in general. Like the narrative was like, these are the people who made it all happen. And it caused so much, friction and division. And what I noticed is that like a lot of folks would speak about it like in private. Either that they just, like myself, I just like thought it was wrong. Like not that I thought it is malicious, but I just thought it was wrong. But there were folks who felt hurt and harm. Like a lot of people had a lot of feelings, but it's like there's no real space to speak about these things in public, because when you speak about it, it's like, oh, you're just jealous, you're just this, that, and the third thing. And it's like, no, these are actual real things though. I've never seen it discussed publicly, which is why this episode was important to me. But I just wanted to put that out there. And if you all have any thoughts on that.
That was a lot, Shannon. I mean, again, it goes down to, I was talking about passing the baton, and we definitely don't want to, when it comes to the youth, you know what I'm saying? We want to make sure that, they're correct in the information that they bring. And again, I found it very refreshing, to work with them. But I was thinking about, like, in terms of passing the baton, I remember in my younger years, like when the Soul Pit magazine first came out, and I was thinking about what Charlie was talking about this best nonprofit and stuff. And I would be devouring, these magazines, because I would see all these powerful women and men and stuff, but they were always like these engineering positions, or it's like they were engineers and they were big marketing execs, and I was like, well, that's not me. I'm a grassroots in the trenches. I guess I don't fit in, but I would see that and I would be like, wow, even in the in our newspaper, what is that? We have the Courier. I would devour that because I wanted to see who was doing what. And it was only until recently that I started seeing, certain social justice activists that, were making headlines, you know what I'm saying? But it was because of trauma, not because of, you know what I'm saying? Not really because of the good work. So it's like, so if you're in the trenches, if you're down here doing the dirty work, do you really, get acknowledged for those kinds of things? And I call it the dirty work because it's not pretty. It's not pretty face fronting the police. It's not a pretty thing. And, no one wants to be like, yeah, look at that girl out there telling the police, nobody wants, but it's something that we must challenge, in order for them to stop, and so, those are the things, again, in terms of passing the baton, to the youth, we still, and right now, I really feel like, social injustice, activism as a whole doesn't really look good because of, all the different things that are happening and that are centered around the communal, cultural, social justice arena right now. And so, and the young people are watching, and we have to remember that there is a baton. It is we're supposed to pass the baton. And what does that look like? What does that look like, passing the baton, to the youth? What are they going to see? What is the precedence that we're sending and the message that we're sending to the youth? And so with that, I'll digress.
Yeah, I think that Shannon, what you were talking about, it really, like, even when there are the best of intentions for doing certain kind of awards, I think you have to really look at it. I think if you're looking to, if for legitimacy in these kinds of things, you really have to, and kind of, well, like what Sharice is doing, you look at the process and you see the process that's going into the selections, and you have to look at the motive behind it too. I think that's really important to know the motive of the agency behind giving these awards out. Is it to recognize someone, who's great in their field, or someone who's done a lot for the city? Or is it, what's the motive? Is it to sell tickets at the banquet? Is it to, have somebody, who empower, give an award to somebody empowered, give an award to a council person or something like that, because, hey, they may be able to help you later, or when there's to a state representative, because when there's a grant to come out, oh, hey, I could, I now I'm in because I gave this to, so-and-so. And so you have to look at the motive. And like I said, I don't think there's anything again, I can speak to the editorial side. There's not anything like that. We really are trying to do the best with what we have, but a lot of times it doesn't work out. I mean, I've had you talk a little bit about sort of cancel culture. If when they sort of give like an update on these are the people who are winning, you know, and or these are the nominees, you start to hear from the other people who are in that business, somebody who wants that award, and they will start ringing your phone and saying the worst kind of things about these people who are maybe leading the awards or who always get the awards. You know, a very well-known local entertainer was winning an award one year, and I don't want to give any sort of, I'm trying not to give any kind of identifying, you know, information at all, but I started getting phone calls from people and emails from people. Just, you know, true or not, I don't know, but I know that it's not the place to discuss whether, you know, this person did that or this person is, you know, and accused of some pretty heinous things. And you know, I called the person up and I said, look, you're nominated for this award. You're you know, you're getting votes, but this is what's going on. And that person said to me, I don't need that. Like, I don't need that sort. I don't need people coming after me because I'm leading in a contest that doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. Now, for this entertainer, it probably would mean more bookings. It could. It's a clip to send off to an out of town club or something like that, or an out of town venue. And so, you know, it's a lot of times it really is like, again, even though at the end of the day they don't mean anything, they can be a blessing. But a lot of times they're a curse. They really are, like, you know, it brings you into something that you didn't want to be in the first place.
And yeah, I wanted to, you know, kind of piggyback again on what, you know, Mona and Charlie were saying. So, you know, even if an organization, their purpose is to brand their organization, because we know if you're doing these big award ceremonies, it's going to bring a lot of eyes. Your organization is going to get noticed. It's going to help you get branded. It's going to help you get noticed, even if that's not the intention. But if that is the intention is selling tickets, you can do that. And we still want to just make sure that we're doing this with integrity. It might make it very hard because if the goal is to sell tickets and brand, you know, you are going to, the way you market it and who you are providing these awards to are going to be people who can bring crowds, who can buy all the tables. And I still think that, you know, when we talk about this award culture, that we can still do both. It's just going to be really, really hard, and it's going to be really tricky. And I think it's important that you make sure you just have the right people on your committee. You know, like with SWAG, we do have a committee. We have a nominations committee. You know, we're very intentional, you know, about the questions, who's on the committee. I'm not a part of the committee because, you know, I want to, you know, stay out of that. Like, you know, Charlie said, it's already a subjective process, but we want to try to make it as objective as possible. But, you know, I cannot highlight enough that we want to make sure that, you know, even if the goal is to brand your organization and do that through an award ceremony, that we're doing it with integrity, and we make sure that the people who are truly, you know, doing the work are getting honored. We're making sure that we are sending these nomination forms to organizations who employ, you know, social workers or employ people who are in the industry that you are trying to award.
All right. So Sharice, you had said, you mentioned committees. Charlie, you mentioned cancel culture. And what that makes me think about is, you know, I have, you know, friends who've been kind of clued in that though they were nominated for different awards, the people there were folks on their nomination committee that were like, no, like they're not getting it. And that's it. Like, you know, they've been shut down in that particular process. So I'm thinking about like the ethics of the process itself, you know, like in how it is used to silence folks. So I'm going to read a question that we got. A person, Mary Ellen Schlegel Ruger, I believe I'm saying your name correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. They asked, are awards, where'd it go? Are awards sometimes given to capture, control, or silence the awardee?
Yeah, I've got to think that nothing in my experience comes to mind. Oh no, actually, that's a lie. Something has come to. Again, we're talking about businesses, and again, by the time in editorial, by the time we would get these nominations of this is the winner, we would just be told this is the winner. We had no way to verify that. Now we look at it, and then we match it up to our who's buying full page ads. A lot of times, oh hey, they match up. But there was one or two times toward the later part in the last 4 or 5 years that 3 or 4 years since I was there that legitimately had folks at the top of the company say, a sales rep comes and says, "Hey, my client didn't win. This is something that there's one particular that I remember. And again, I won't mention the name of the business. And this the winner was this brand new small, and I don't want to say for sure, but I believe it was this small Black-owned business, and they won this out of nowhere. They could have played the game. They got their people to say, "Hey, if you like us, vote for us." But this other well-established, long-time company, they weren't going to buy their big ad if they weren't a winner in this award. So I was told to switch winners, and I said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to switch winners." At the end of the day, they made co-winners, and I was, it was one of those things I was told, "You do it, or that's it." And so that's one of those things that happened. Those were one of those things that happened. Again, when they made me that ultimatum later in my career, you do that or you're gone. I was gone, because there's just at some point you have to stand up. And even my whole time in this business, I had an idea that things were getting manipulated, maybe at the top, or maybe as somebody, maybe like sometimes there would be 3 honorable mentions. And I thought, why do we have 3 honorable mentions? That they're trying to get somebody's name up there, because every name in there, that's their rubric. Their rubric is every name in there is an ad of some size, of some kind. And even a third place or an honorable mention might buy a small ad, "Thank you, readers, for this or that." And so but yeah, I've absolutely seen appeasement in awards. Not as often as some people might think, as far as actually seeing it. I believe it happened yearly. Again, this isn't just when I worked at City Paper. This is 30 years and 7 or 8 different publications I worked at over that time. And, it's funny how those things always work out. Oh, your best advertisers won an award this year. How nice. So, but there have been times that without question, I've seen it happen and had been told to change it, and I wouldn't.
Sheesh. Let me point out how Charlie and I met. We were at this speaker series, and we were both on narrative. You got to speak truth. And I was like, that's my homie. I definitely appreciate you, Charlie.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. Another person, Michelle Green asks, well, actually it's a statement. I'm wondering what y'all thoughts are. She says, sometimes I feel like when a new organization arises in Pittsburgh, the new organization has to give awards to other organizations in order to be accepted into the club, so to speak. Is that anything that you all have witnessed or you feel has been taking place?
Okay, I'll speak to that the best way that I can. Let me make it clear too. Also, so I am the organization that I'm a part of now is NAIP, which is New African Independence Party. So we're somewhat, we're a political party. So because we seek to educate, in a political way. I don't necessarily that type of thing is not necessarily occurring that much. I can say with that I've experienced so much within that organization, but just in the overall social justice, collective as a whole, I would say that, there does seem to be like this cherry picking, thing that goes on. There's this cherry picking. And so, and then you hear the cliches like that, like was said in here in parentheses, the club, feeling like you need to do and you need to go above and beyond. Again, that's that teacher's pet mentality. Speaking to what Charlie said, there's been businesses within the community, that have gotten awards, and we're back here scratching our heads like, well, what for what? Like, you haven't even really been in the community that long to even get this sort of acknowledgement. So I feel as though, to answer that question, yeah, it's not just here in Pittsburgh. It's all over, But since we're dealing with Pittsburgh, yes, it does happen. It does happen. There's a cherry picking that happens, and then people are left feeling as though their work has been dismissed, and then that's where this erasure comes in.
Word up, word up. Thank you, Mona, for responding to that. Sharice, I want to ask you, because you are our award hostess in the room, what does it look like? What's your process for selecting, nominating folks and folks ultimately?
Right. So the process is we do have a nominations committee, which is separate from like the SWAG committee that helps us, like with the day-to-day or maybe the month-to-month stuff. So there are specific questions that are asked on this nomination form. I mean, anybody can have access to it, just about their credentials, because that qualifies you or disqualifies you if you're not an actual social worker. Your skin in the game. What have you done? Who have you helped? Maybe some actual examples. So I allow the committee to, gather all of this information. And when they, submit names, I want to know how they decided on this. Are there any, personal connections? Are there any conflicts of interest? And someone asked a good question, are there any legit awards out there? I think that's a good question. I think the awards or the ceremonies are only as legit or ethical as the people who are running them. There's always going to be some error for a conflict of interest or some things that get past me. But, I feel good knowing that the people who were on a committee are people who are ethical, people who are of integrity, or I wouldn't put them on there. And I also accept it. Not everybody's going to be happy. When you're doing something like this, you're going to upset some people. There are people, it doesn't erase their work, or it doesn't make their work less valuable. There was just a reason that these people were selected by the committee.
It's just, and there's a, and I want to make it clear that I don't think awards in and of themselves are a bad thing if it's legitimately recognizing, some part of the community or something in the, for example, I think 2017, we introduced our own Pittsburgh of the Year Award, and we put out to not just folks, but also people who were involved with different organizations, and say, hey, if you were to pick a Pittsburgh of the Year, who would you pick? If we went around and talked to people. And one of the names that came up to me, and it just seemed like as soon as I heard the name, I'm like, yeah, it was 2017. And the name that came up was Leon Ford. And I said, yeah, that's the winner. And there was in the room, I mean, everyone in the room agreed. Leon was a great choice. But then there's this idea of like, well, what about so-and-so? Maybe we could make them a co-awardee just because someone's going to be mad that she's not in there. Or maybe we could then add a second place for honorable mention. And I said, look, if Leon's the guy, Leon's the guy. And Leon, it was obviously the guy, and you just have to, in that case, I know that people are going to step up and say, you're wrong. And if we can have a discussion about that, that's great, but at least there's something there. There's a plan there. And sometimes, like I said, in that case, in my mind, sometimes they're easy and sometimes they're not. But even the Leon Ford thing, which I thought even the most, horrible people out there among us. I mean, how can you say that Leon's not the guy? But we got some really horribly like racially charged letters. And again, this is something that we did that it was as fair a process as we could make it. It was, we didn't just make the decision ourselves. But and so then I asked myself, well, is it worth it to have this award if we give this to Leon or someone else, and they're just going to be attacked for it, and not just by maybe someone else who thought they deserved it, but again, someone who decides that for whatever reason Leon deserved to be shot in the spine by police officers that night. It's just and so you wonder sometimes, are these, so when you try and do them legitimately, it's going to always make someone mad, and there is fire that is worth taking, and for me that was fire worth taking. But if just because you didn't win best nail salon, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna take fire because you didn't like the winner. And so there are things worth fighting for, and they have to be meaningful. They have to be, and I'm sure, like I said, Sharice's award, I'm sure the recipient of that award, it meant so much because, again, you're being selected by people in your field. You're being selected by people who know your work and know sort of what the excellence in your field should be. And so they're saying, hey, you meet the criteria above and beyond. And it doesn't mean that somebody else didn't do, a teacher of the year. It doesn't mean that, Mr. Jones didn't also do a great job this year, but it's representative of what your industry is doing great. So we'd like to, we want to honor, and this person maybe did a little something this year that was worthy of that little extra boost. And so it really is, sometimes it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation, because people want to see this stuff too, but it causes more trouble than anything I've ever worked with. So
if I could say something real quick. Thank you so much, Charlie. As a in-house caretaker of my own mother for 5 years now, I've had my mom in my care for 5 years. And, throughout that process, throughout this process of caring for her, I always thought that, there's this, I guess this might have been some selfish thinking, but I'm like, well, nobody's acknowledging, or nobody's, where's everybody acknowledging what I'm doing and over here, and, yada, 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 with my mom, you understand? And this is my reasonable service. Like, I understand that she's my mother, I understand that. And if I look at it from a spiritual perspective, I am blessed. I do get enriched. There is a sort of blessing, there's even a scriptural reference that says, the things that we do in secret we'll get rewarded openly for those things, right? If we're not out here looking for that blessing, if we're not out here looking and seeking, for someone to acknowledge me, notice me, no one does see what goes on behind closed doors, even as a caretaker. But what I do know is that a couple times a year, the organization that undergirds, that supports me and my mom in my caretaking, they send me packages. They send me little care packages. Man, if it's just toilet paper, if it's just hand gel, if it's just, I'm so glad to get that, and this is a kid, these are the caretakers saying, hey, you're doing a good job. We know that as a caregiver that, it's hard, it gets hard. And then they have all these other types of avenues for us to be able to tap into as a caregiver, and I don't have all the help that I thought that I was going to help with my mom, and it is challenging taking care of her. She's a stroke survivor, so it's challenging. But at the end of the day, I'm not out here, with some horn saying, hey, notice me. I'm not out here on the front lines facing the police, just for the heck of it. And, I'm doing it because I want there to be an expected end. I believe, and that's what the quest is, for an expected end. It's not necessarily to get out here and say, hey, look at all the work that I've been doing, but it helps. And it makes you feel good to know that someone is paying attention. You understand, in our humanness, we want to know, are my people, or the people, or the community pleased with the work that I'm putting in? And if so, how can they make me know it? How can I know it? Even in the midst of not getting that justice that I'm seeking, how can the people that I'm out here fighting for make us to know that what we're doing is appreciated.
Yes, Mona. Very much so. And yeah, I think you hit on something very important there. It's like, it's not about like the awards and being recognized, but we have an existential need to exist as people, right? Like we need to be validated in our existence, like as people. And so like the work that you do with your mom, like that's real work. Like, so like the care packages, that is, the organization saying like, hey, we see you, sis. Like, thank you for doing the work, like, and that's all. It doesn't really take too much, right? Like it doesn't take much at all. But it does make me think about like how many folks are not receiving any sort of validation for their existence, right? Like, and so like that need to exist, right? Like not being satiated, and what that does, right? I think early on, it was either Sharice or Charlie, and probably Sharice had said like, folks face a depression, like when they're not recognized, right? Like that's a very real thing, that's a very real thing. And I want to jump back to what you said, Charlie. I mean, as a recipient of Sharice's award, it does mean a lot to me because, for one thing, Sharice is a social worker that I admire, right? So for someone that I admire to say like, hey, sis, you're doing your thing, I'm like, oh, like it means a lot, like it definitely means a lot. And, we're getting to know each other, but we don't know each other that well. Like, and folk don't like me like that. So I don't get stuff off of proximity to anybody. So it's always like, oh, if I got something, it's because I got something. It ain't because they know me. But that's definitely, it's definitely important. But I'm thinking about what you were saying, what all of you have been saying about intention, right? The intention behind the awards. Because even if there's no malice involved in constructing these things. So like you had mentioned the Pittsburgh of the Year award, I've seen Activist of the Year, Nonprofit of the Year, but what does that actually mean? And this I'm thinking about like process, right? Like, and how is it inclusive of community? And we're folks who can like push back and figure out where the holes are. Cause like, what is a Pittsburgh of the Year? Like, what does that actually mean? Right? Like, that's such a big, like, what is that actually, how do you qualify that? How do you quantify that? Like, what is an activist of what does that actually mean? And so even though it's like, oh, we want to, celebrate these, different folks who typically are not recognized, to Mona's point, like, she said earlier, like she would check out the courier and it's like engineer and and whatever else was like folks who are in a whole different world than what she's in, right? Like grassroots typically are not recognized. Recently, we've seen, grassroots work and social justice work being recognized. But it's like, how do you do that? And I don't think there's a clear understanding of what does it actually mean. First of all, what does it mean to be in grassroots anything, right? Like, because like the recognition of like Activists of the Year, what like what does this mean? And then it causes like, it causes that division. Like, so like all of these things we've been talking about just happens, it just a burst of happening. And it's not even, it's okay to get it wrong sometimes. It's okay to like, okay, like we kind of move wrong in that way, like, but how do we fix it? So I'm thinking about all that to say, I'm wondering from you all, and also Mona, if you had any thoughts as a community person, what does it look like to kind of check these processes? Like, right, like what does it look like to challenge the processes? Like maybe there is harm here, like maybe is there lack of consideration or intention here? Like how do we make that tighter? Like how do we include community without it being messy? But how do we make these things so that they can exist with as little harm as possible, if that makes sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense.
I think that we just legit need to reinitiate and reestablish an elders council again. That is desperately missing from our community, where we can have a council of elders that would even, be themselves willing to be held accountable. You understand? And not be above reproach. And that's probably problematic. And I think that's probably why the Elders Council is not all the way together from what I'm to understand. But I think that, in the Black community, we've always been able to go to our elders for counsel, and unfortunately, we have not many elders that we can even, maybe people have their personal elders, but I'm talking about an overall council that maybe could, be the ear, and the ear of resolve, and being able to mediate these problematic issues in regards to how do we say with this, this group, and how do we dissect, and how do we move in and out of the people without causing harm to them? And that's the main thing. We need to know how to move in and out of these organizations without causing harm, without saying, yes, this group over here, they really worked hard last summer. You understand what I'm saying? And then maybe the elders, because if it comes down to just one person, then it becomes down to this cherry picking narrative. But when it's maybe a council, of elders, that are able to say, this is how things are going to be done in justice and in fairness and in righteousness. And I know it sounds far-fetched, but this would be my resolve, has always been to go and seek out the voice of the elders. And the elders right now, even in the communities, are feeling silenced and feeling like nobody wants their counsel when it's desperately needed. But yes, I feel as though we must speak to that thing. We cannot see, silence is violence sometimes, and silence isn't bliss. Silence is hell. And then when you don't confront and you don't speak to a thing, that doesn't sit well with you, and you know that this is affecting the cultural community as a whole, then shame on you for not being able to speak to it. I happen to be one of those type of persons and sisters that will speak to it. When I see it, I'm going to cut the head off of it. I'm going to speak to it. I'm going to call it for what it is, without putting my emotions in there. And we need to be able to bring receipts. We need to be able to say, well, this over here, this group, was not necessarily acknowledged for this. Meanwhile, and it's not to put groups against groups or organizations against organizations, but it's just making sure that no one falls through the cracks of the hard works that they're doing. That's what it really is. But when erasure culture takes place, it looks mischievous and it looks intentional and it's disrespectful, to the work that's been putting in. And I'm talking about those of us. I can't even remember ever receiving a dime, from an organization. I put more money, into doing the work to get whatever work needs to be done than I've ever received. Again, like I said, I received my blessings, elsewhere. But again, those of us boots on the ground, we're looking to say, okay, well, who is undergirding us? Who is supporting us at the end of the day when we see, people that may not be in the same arena that we're in, but yet and still constantly getting acknowledged, based on their affiliation with who they know. And that needs to stop. And I'm not going to stop speaking to it. You have to take a bold stance, and it makes people uncomfortable.
Word up. Thank you so much. Sharice, if you wouldn't mind going next, and we're going to wind down. So if you'd like to give your thoughts on that, how do we make this process better, and whatever final thoughts you might have?
I mean, obviously, all of what Mona said, and I would just, some words came to my mind: vision, mission, purpose, and end goal. So when we're creating these award ceremonies, and even as we continue to have them, we want to make sure we're looking at the vision. Like, what is your vision for, giving out these, I don't want to say giving out these awards, but honoring people for their work? What is the mission? What is the purpose? And most importantly, the end goal. Like, what are you hoping will happen as a result of these people receiving this recognition? How is it going to impact this individual? Is one of the questions you asked. And how is it going to impact the community? And then a committee. I think, like as Mona was saying, that the elders, like, I think that's a great idea. Just being very mindful and intentional about who's going to be. Like, there's a book that I'm loving right now. It's called Who Not How. It's kind of business related, but I think it relates to everything. Like, who is going to be a part of your process? Because I think that will determine, more inclusivity and not erasing the valuable work that people are out here doing. So who are you going to have on your committee? Are you going to have somebody on your committee who has their ears to the streets, who are out there doing the work, who, may be able to reel people back in? Are you going to have an elder? Or are you going to have someone who's business minded? Are you going to have someone, who's more into promoting? So, just being intentional about the people who are on there. And obviously, we just want to always make sure that we are operating from a place of integrity, and that's actually supposed to be one of our social work ethics. That's what I had in mind when creating that award ceremony. We have 6 social work core values. So we wanted to make sure that people who were getting honored represented at least one of those core values, because that represents the work that we're doing. And my laptop's about to die, unfortunately. I don't know where my charger is. I usually have it. I'm usually good at that. It's been a crazy day. But you asked a good question. What award would we be honored to get? I've received a decent amount of awards, and I'm grateful for them. And I don't, tie my self-esteem or my validation to those awards. But I feel that I get the award every day from the clients that I serve and the work that I do. Just knowing that someone chose life because of the work I do. They decided not to take that bridge. They decided that they want to do better in life. And with the compassion fatigue workshops, receiving the feedback that, staff morale has increased because we did a compassion fatigue workshop, that we're retaining more employees because people are able to take better care of themselves and are able to prevent compassion fatigue and burnout. So receiving that feedback that's coming from genuine people who are being impacted by my work, that's what keeps me going every day. And just seeing the looks on your faces when you got those swag awards and just watching everything run smoothly, like that made my month. So that's what keeps me going and excited about doing this work. So thank you for having me, and
Nice.
Loving all the comments.
Thank you so much, Sharice. That was
Thank you.
I get an award. The essential. You know how they got the essential workers? I'm an essential worker, okay? Social justice responder. That's what I am, and I'm an essential worker. Just imagine if we weren't out here, when something happened, and we don't get out here and we don't raise our voices and pump our fists. So I want the essential revolutionary worker award. That's what I want.
Yes, well done. Thank you so much for taking your time out today, Sharice. I really very much appreciate you. The work that you do, your intention, your integrity is very much valued. Charlie, what are your thoughts? How can we make this process better? And do you have any final thoughts?
I actually want to answer the question too about an award that I've received. And again, this is going to in the middle of a show about, awards not being the greatest thing for me to do. I'm not trying to do a humble brag to say I've won awards for my writing before, but I was working at a paper in the late 90s south of Chicago, and it was a run of the mill. It was like one of those stories that the editor puts on your desk and says, this church is having a food drive. Talk to the pastor and do a few hundred words. And I did, and I talked to him and went out and just took a couple pictures, and it was a nice little story, and I was happy to do it. And it was for a good cause. But the next week I got a thank you card, which is always, those are always the best for me. It's like just somebody's thanking for whatever, even somebody who I didn't write about them, but they saw something I wrote or that we wrote as a publication and said, hey, thanks, because that really needed to be talked about. But this was, thank you so much for bringing light to what we're doing. And they invited me to come to Sunday service, and they had lunch afterwards. They brought in, it was for a couple community members. And that meant the most to me because, it also made me think in my head, this is something that, it took 2 hours, 3 hours out of my week to do. And, it meant a whole lot to somebody. And so that's what I think was, for me, that was the most important sort of recognition, and been other little things like that, but that's the one that really sticks out. And just in closing, I got to say, just you have to check the intention of the organization. That's the most important thing. And if it's coming from a media company or something like that, I mean, you could be almost assured that at least part of the reason. I'm not going to lump everybody together. And again, the people that I've worked with at these publications on the editorial side, you got to play with the hand you're dealt at that point. But I think that media companies have to have to put more thought into these, the people at the upper level of these companies, and don't just start thinking about the paycheck that's coming in. And but you have to think about what you're doing. And from the business side of these publications, the reaction has been, I don't care, because we're making money. And so that's really part of the problem. And I think that, before you start to worry and panic that you're not going to be named, best Chinese restaurant or something like that, just think about, like, at the end of the day, what does this really mean? And I'd rather have, a letter I got from a customer, put up over the register than worry about, what some readers or potentially, my ad dollars say about my company. And so you really have to just pay attention to the intention of the organization, and you just have to, there's nothing wrong with receiving recognition, as we've all talked about, but you just got to keep it in. You've got to keep it in context. And as mad as some people get about these things, it's just, believe me, it's not worth it. You're putting more thought into this, unfortunately, than the media company is. And again, I'm talking about the business side, because that's what it is. That's the one issue, really, the one issue a year. Again, all papers I've worked at. I worked at 7 papers over my career, and every one of them, the idea is, this is our moneymaker. And you guys, you're reporters, you're journalists, and but you're going to go write these stories, and these fluff stories, and these, and because this is what is going to pay your salary for at least part of the year. And so, you just have, I think it's important for people to know that. And it's actually been good for me to sort of and I've talked about this one-on-one, like this, Shannon said, we've talked about it many times, and it's kind of good to be out. I'm able to talk about it now, and to say, when somebody says, oh man, I really wanted, looking for that best comedian award. And I just want to say, it doesn't matter. Worry about, you get laughs and you get paid for doing that. Or, if you get paid for your music and you get paid to do that, that's all the recognition you need. And it's I think that too much, even from outside forces, somebody who's going to think twice about maybe hiring you because you won this award, that, again, as I said, at the end of the day, doesn't have anything to say about your talent or your dedication or anything like that. And so you just got to think and check it out, check out the intention and who's doing it and why.
Word up. Thank you so much, Charlie. That's absolute facts, right? Like, but it also makes me think about, like, how folks are receiving opportunity and whatnot because of, their presence in awards and news and whatever else. It makes me feel like perhaps that should not be the measuring stick, right, for someone's capability or whatnot, or whatever the thing is. Because I think, like, there's one thing is the validation, right? Like, it's the, like, seeing this that we just all kind of need, and being able to separate, like, this doesn't define me, like, as a person or as a creator or as a whatever it is that I am. But on the tangible side, on the business side, is, being recognized, being visible, like, that does help with business, right? It does help with opportunity and doors opening. So, like, that's a very real, tangible side of things. And so as you've been talking about, I was like, well, how do you even curtail that? Like, that being a reality, because, you shouldn't care, but also, like, as far as, like, your value, but also, like, there are these tangibles on this other side. So what does it look like to make sure that, the things are what's the words I'm looking for? That, like, essentially, that folks are not eating off of these awards, essentially. And not to say that, like, they shouldn't be used as, valid, like, markers of, like, oh, I've done these things. However, like, if that's all the valuation you had to enter these doors, to get these opportunities, then you don't really have much value. So I'm thinking about that.
And I've even over the years, I've requested limitations. Like, you can't win it more than 2 years in a row. Originally it was like every year, but they're not going to go for that. But, like, okay, has to be a new winner every 2 years, or every year. And you have to mix it up. But again, if it's best, and that's the thing too, they're really looking for these big businesses. That's why you don't always see, like, best bus driver, things like that. The people that are out there you don't see that, because the bus driver is not going to take out an ad in the paper. And so it doesn't really matter to them. And like I said, I think that, I don't know that it'll ever happen, but, business side needs to listen to the side, the editorial side, the news side, the people that are out there talking to the community. And, if somebody's mad about these awards, they don't call, Frank the salesman, they call me, and, or they call the reporter that they know. And so, oftentimes reporters and writers and editors, we're left to clean up the mess made by someone else. And so, yeah, it is. I mean, and we all use them too. If you're named it and you know that you can, by putting that little bug on your website, you might get somebody else looking at you. So it's really a tough situation to navigate, but we have to navigate. We have to start navigating it. And, it's already a major issue. Again, as we've talked about for years now, it's already a major issue, but I think that there haven't been conversations. There just have not been any sort of really public conversations. And so I think these need to happen. So.
Word up. Thank you so much, Charlie, for being you. Consistently being you. I really appreciate you. Every time, like we'll hook up and like you just have so much insight and honesty to offer. I really appreciate you, man. Yeah, you too. I mean, you've been a great sort of counsel to me over the years. So I really appreciate it. And you made me think about things that I've never thought about or that I've thought about, but I've never really known how to handle. Like I can look at a newspaper and say, you know what, we need to have some more diversity in our subjects. And people are like, but I'm a middle-aged white dude. I mean, I've talked to you and I've gotten a lot of ideas from you and a lot of like, okay, but this is how you go about it. Not however you think, but this is how you go about it. And so you've been super helpful to me. I really appreciate it. Mutual, man. So I'm looking forward to continuing to connect. Thank you for taking the time out today. You're an amazing person, Charlie. You too. Thanks, Jen. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mona. Mona, you're muted, lovely.
Oh, I'm do that.
Oh. Mona.
Thank you,
So
Jen. This was so
absolutely.
I appreciated it.
Yeah. So what are your final thoughts? You gave us your thoughts on like how we can make the process better, which I think was super dope as well. I'm wondering like, what are your final thoughts that you want to add to this space before we cut out?
Develop structure. We need to develop some sort of structure around this. It's a real thing. It's not, I think that emotions will get involved when dismissal continues to happen, and it's a difference between, I feel like there's a difference between feeling like you deserve something as opposed to what you've really earned and worked for and worked towards, and so these are the things that like what Charlie was saying, I'm not familiar with a whole lot of how these things flow because I'm never looking for it, but when I see it, and then as a Black woman who applauds, you understand, and celebrates, I rejoice with them that rejoice. When I see Black women of excellence, breaking the ceilings and things that they said that we couldn't do, so when I am feeling, within my own self and my humanness that like, wow, somehow I've been dismissed. Within that feeling, I know that I'm not the only one sitting in that seat. And I'm sitting here wondering how many other Black women like myself in this city are feeling like that they've been overlooked. And, it makes you want to throw in the towel. And we need to stop that. We need to stop the behavior of erasure and dismissal, because what it does is that it puts out the fire, whether or not they know that. It has the potential to put out the fire that drives us to get out here to fight on behalf of us, and you. And so, yeah, I feel as though we need to reevaluate. We need to come up with some sort of structure and how to navigate through, how do we make sure that in the interim of things that we're still making people feel embraced. And then we're still holding space, even for social injustice work that's not so pretty. We still need to hold space for those like the grassroots workers, as I say, and not be so quick to dismiss, that work as well. There's been a lot of work. There was people that were texting me and I just couldn't, get to some of their questions because I really was trying to listen to what the other panelists were saying. But, people, are wanting to know where do we go from here? And how do the grassroots organizers, how do the people, the boots on the ground workers that may not be affiliated with quote unquote large organizations, how are they still being embraced and not being left behind?
Yes, Mona. Malcolm X said, we are not outnumbered, we are out organized. That's absolutely, yes, girl. That's true.
Hey.
Yeah. So what does it look like, right, for us to incorporate everybody? And I like what you said about, like, even if, folks are not being, if you're not the one that's on the stage, how are we still like honoring each other, right? Like, how are we still honoring like the masses, the millions of us that are out here doing things, right? Like existing in life. Everybody's a butterfly affecting someone else, right? Like we're all doing things. And that validation, we have an existential need to exist. Like that's just period. Like we all need to be validated in our existence, right? Like, and so like, how are we getting that? People like literally die from isolation. Like people die from depression. People die from it, so it's a very real thing, like, and I do think we need to talk about it more, but absolutely, like that structure. What does it look like, right? And then what does it look like for us to challenge the structure, right? Like how are we continuing to like push at it and push back and find the holes? Because I'm queen of finding the holes. Like I want to know how something doesn't work so we can figure out how to make it work. That's period,
Right.
So I absolutely like love, cherish, honor, and respect you, Mona. Like, like we've known each other for such a little time, but I watch everybody and how they move. And, and I value you and I appreciate the work and your sacrifices and your presence. If I've never told you.
I'm humbled. I am so humbled. I'm honored again that you held this space for all of us to come on here, and share, and talk about this. I hope that, that the people, that the audience, that they left with a broader perspective, on now how to navigate, through what it is that we're all dealing with, know that you're not alone. Someone else has experienced it. Someone's experiencing it right now, and someone's going to experience it after us. And they're going to have to refer to these type of conversations because it's a real thing and it's really happening. And again, we need to make space, and we'll deal with that a little bit more. There's a lot of work to be done, and so let's get the work done. Black power, all power to the people, all power to the people, all power to the people.
Thank you so much, Mona.
You're welcome. Thank you, Shannon.
All right, so that'll do it for today. Thank you all for sticking it out with us. Super dope show. So if you didn't catch all of it, I certainly suggest that you run it back. So as a reminder, the narrative justice got started in honor of Leroy Powell. Leroy Powell was murdered due to the carelessness of our local media. It is important that we are holding our media accountable for the way they show up in our communities, Black, brown, and marginalized. Because like what narrative is our most powerful tool. And so how we're using it, how it's being wielded either against us or for us, like does matter. It only takes about 25% of the community for change to occur. So don't think that we need everybody to be on board. You don't need everybody to be on board. Like we only need a quarter of our community. So if that community is Pittsburgh, if that community is Allegheny County, if that community is your family, if that community is you and your 4 friends, it only takes, it only takes a few of y'all, to make change happen. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind always. There's real power in our voices. Tell your story. Don't let anyone take your voice away. Like that is where the power is held. So if someone is biting your tongue for you, like they got your power. Always feel comfortable to share your story. If people don't like your story, then they shouldn't have did what they did in the first. As a reminder, today's news, Changing Our Narrative, will be Mondays at 7. So tomorrow at 7 p.m. You can check that out on QK Productions Facebook page. You can also check it out on their YouTube page at Black News 325 and on our Twitter page at Black News 325. A reminder also, anyone who might be in need of rent assistance, utility assistance, and you live in Allegheny County, you can check us out and us as in the Wellness Collective. You can check us out in our drop-in center, 337 5th Avenue in Mckeesport, not Pittsburgh, in Mckeesport, PA, 15132. We're open 10 to 6 on most days, Monday through Friday, except on Thursdays, it's 12 to 8. We also have a food pantry, so if you need some food or cleaning supplies, we'll soon have a clothing little pantry, the closet. So if you need clothes, that stuff will be there as well. You can also, if you have donations, you can donate to either the clothes or the food. Again, we're open 10 to 6, so give us a call. If you're planning to donate clothes, just make sure that they are clean, like new. We want to make sure we are respecting our folks that we are giving to. A reminder, around the corner from us is Mckeesport Co-Ed Shelter that's ran by Team PSBG. Shout out to Aubrey Plesh, the founder of Team PSBG. Currently, they are looking for Black hair and body products, and that is hair and body products for Black people. They have, a number of folks who, of course, stay at the shelter, and they want to make sure that they have the right types of products available for them. So you can check them out at 523 Sinclair Street in Mckeesport, PA 15132. Again, that's 523 Sinclair Street, Mckeesport, PA 15132. And if you have a story to tell, if you have a narrative, if you have something that you want to amplify, please hit us up. You can reach out to me at 412-453-6309, or you can hit me up via email, racialjusticeandmedia@gmail.com. And that'll be it.